Direct News TV. June 25, 2024. Kenya Finance Bill protests live, demonstrators killed outside Parliament. Hundreds of anti-tax protesters have entered Kenya's parliament and part of the building is on fire. A coalition of human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and the Kenya Medical Association, have said that 5 people have been shot dead after police fired at protesters. U.S., which recently designated Kenya as major non-NATO ally, urges calm. The White House has called for calm, saying it was closely monitoring the situation in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. "We condemn violence in all its forms and urge calm," a National Security Council spokesperson said. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration last month designated Kenya as a major non-NATO ally, a status that highlights cooperation between the two countries and entails some economic and military benefits. Kenya Defense Forces deployed to assist police, Defense Minister Aden Duale has shared a formal government notice on the deployment, which says the move comes in response to the security emergency caused by the ongoing violent protests in parts of the country. The protests have resulted in destruction and breaching of critical infrastructure, the notice reads. Streets around Parliament quiet, but gunfire heard in Nairobi. Al Jazeera's Malcolm Webb, reporting from the Kenyan capital, said that crowds have moved away from the Parliament of Kenya in the city centre as night falls. However, he said that gunfire could be heard elsewhere in Nairobi. The streets around Parliament had largely been cleared, but they were full of debris. There was a presence of riot police everywhere, and police carrying various weapons including the tear gas used to disperse protesters, Webb said. But a couple of blocks away from there, we could hear gunfire. Have IMF reforms fueled protests in Kenya? Kenya agreed to a bailout program with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in 2021. The program promised sweeping economic reforms, including a steep increase in revenue collection to 25% of gross domestic product, GDP, to ease the country's debt burden. The next year, President William Ruto came to power after a campaign championing Kenya's working poor. Since then, he has been caught between his election promises and appeasing the IMF's demands, urging the government to cut deficits to obtain more funding. In the 2024-25 bill, the Kenyan government aims to raise $2.7 billion in additional taxes to reduce the budget deficit and state borrowing. Kenya's public debt stands at 68% of GDP, higher than the 55% of GDP recommended by the World Bank and the IMF. Grappling with acute liquidity challenges amid uncertainty over its ability to access capital from financial markets, Kenya has turned to the IMF, which has urged the government to meet revenue targets to access more funding. Stipulations placed by the IMF on countries and the subsequent economic measures taken by their governments to meet those demands have caused unrest in several countries, including Argentina, Suriname, and Sri Lanka in recent years. Kenya in general is a country in economic distress. The price of almost everything has gone up, but what has not gone up are the wages that people are taking home. And so when the government has been increasing taxes over the past few years, it leads to people having to choose whether to put food on the table or not. Then you have young people in the education sector, thousands of them are graduating but not finding jobs. But the Kenyan government has no other plan apart from increasing taxes. Kenya has no oil or mineral wealth, like diamonds. Most Kenyans, when you speak to them, do not trust their politicians. What they find is that politicians say one thing in public when they're under pressure, but when reality comes, they do the opposite. Kenyans are not against paying taxes, but they don't see what their taxes are doing for them. Kenya on the boil, all you need to know. Young demonstrators are angry at a new finance bill that President Ruto says is necessary to offset heavy public debt. This led to violent scenes on Tuesday, with police using live ammunition against hundreds of protesters. So what happened in the Parliament building in Nairobi? What are the controversial tax proposals about? And why is this politically sensitive? Police must exercise restraint and stop using excessive force, FIDH. The International Federation for Human Rights, FIDH, says Kenyans are protesting for their rights amidst rising inflation, post-flood recovery, and ongoing corruption. These youth-led demonstrations, ongoing for weeks, reflect deep-seated grievances that can only be addressed by substantial reforms, reduction of government spending and the tackling of corruption, the group said on X. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.